Hey folks, Dr. Mike Israetel here for Renaissance Periodization. What do you do if you are not recovered? You should have been recovered, but you didn't recover on time in hypertrophy training. That's a complex question. Luckily, we have a complex but pretty easy to understand answer. Recovery training at every level is the topic here. What do we mean by every level? Let's get right into it. So there are different timescales and targets of the recovery process depending on how badly you are not recovered. For example, you could be recovered for everything else, and that muscle group fundamentally that you're training, let's say it's chest, is pretty recovered, but the exercise you're not recovered for. It's one specific exercise that's bothering you, things aren't going well. What do we do about that? Next, we can ask the question, and don't worry, we'll answer all these in their due time. We could have a whole muscle group that's not recovered, like no exercise is recovered for chest because chest isn't recovered. What about the session? Let's say we have chest and biceps and back in the same session and everything's under recovered. There's no way we're going to have a really, really good workout, at least multiple workouts in a row at this rate for chest or back or biceps. The whole session is dog crap. What do we do about it? It's going to be a different recipe to make sure that recovery comes along than if just the bent row is feeling bad, but everything else is feeling great, like an exercise, or just the back wasn't under recovered, but the chest and biceps weren't. That's for muscle group. Next, we have the half week option. If muscles that you're training, specific ones, or actually all of them, are under recovered for a whole half week, there's something pretty serious going on that's going to need much more in-depth remediation to get us back on the recovered track. In addition to that, we have options for deloading. We'll talk about what a deload really requires, how much under recovery. It's like a week of things going really, really badly. What is required for active rest? And that's generally when several weeks things are going real bad, and specifically what kind of exact symptoms come where you decide, am I taking a deload or am I taking an active rest phase? And then lastly, the longest time scale of under recovery and the one that requires the longest fix is an entire low volume resensitization phase. When do you take a resensitization phase versus just changing the exercise for that day and everything in between? Let's get to it and start with the exercise. So here's the problem. You are underperforming on a given exercise. Like you did bench press 200 pounds for sets of 10 last week. This week it's 205 and it's like sets of 8 and 7 and 6 and you're grinding close to failure and you're like, oh, the bench is off. And or it's feeling really stale, just you're failing to connect very well with your muscles, and or especially your joints and connective tissues just aren't feeling it. You would love to continue to bench press, but it's just bothering your shoulder. And maybe you know it's a bench press specific thing, and if maybe you switch the exercise, your pecs fundamentally feel great. It's just that specific exercise is bothering your joints in a way that doesn't allow you to hit your normal planned small PRs. They're sort of the quintessential progressive element of all training, okay? And one hint that it's just the exercise that's the problem is you're getting better on everything through that whole past week and through that week. So your chest has been getting stronger and stronger and stronger. You're setting PRs on flies, on dumbbell presses, but the bench just is not going, especially today. What do you do about it? The standard of answer, just bust through, is a fine answer, but I think we can probably do better. So here are your options. First, and I do mean first because this is what you probably should try first, it's not just numerically listed first in this list here, is try to alter the technique of that exercise a little bit to get a better stimulus to fatigue ratio. Specifically, try to get the feel of the muscles generating high tension, getting a burn, while at the same time not irritating your joints in the way that they are. So for example, if you're benching and the bench just isn't going well and your shoulder hurts, maybe your right shoulder, right sort of in the middle there, try a little closer grip. Try maybe angling your palms out a little. Try a wider grip. Try arching more. Try arching less. Make some adjustments during that warm-up process if it's not feeling good. And a lot of times that will require you to decrease the load a little bit. But once the adjustments are made, if they work, and here's the thing why this is first, a lot of times they do, all you do is you move your hands out 1 inch and all of a sudden the bench feels incredible. You don't have any shoulder pain. You're like, oh, I'm glad I didn't just take that whole exercise out and replace it with something else. And then boom, you start a little lighter. After a few working sets, you're back to hitting PRs all over again and problem solved. Fortunately, it doesn't always work out like that. So what you can do if that doesn't work is try to replace that exercise with another exercise for one or maybe a few sessions, but try it again pretty soon. So for example, week 1, bench press went fine. Week 2, you had some joint pain. So week 2, you took out the bench press that very day. And then week 3, you also didn't bench. You replaced it with a dumbbell press or a machine press, and everything felt fine. And now your shoulder feels really good. Doesn't bother you doing anything. Maybe in week 4, you try to bench press again. And a lot of times it'll go super well. And it turns out there's nothing wrong with the bench press. That means you have to stay away from it for a long time. You're golden and the bench is back. And then in the next mesocycle, you bench and everything's super good. So that's the first thing, because a lot of folks will have trouble with an exercise and they're like, I'm not hack squatting for another couple months, man. It bothers my knees. What if not hack squatting for 1 or 2 sessions fixed all the problem, especially combined potentially with you take out the hack squat or whatever is bothering your knees, and then when you come back to it, you try a different technique. And that 1-2 punch really can ameliorate a lot of exercise-specific recovery problems. Now, that doesn't always work. So our last option is to just indefinitely take out the exercise that's problematic, replace it with a very homologous exercise that does almost the same thing, another flat press, for example, or if a hack squat example, a leg press or something like that. Really just accomplishes pretty much the very, very similar thing, but that other exercise you keep in there, and the exercise that was bothering you, you don't come back to for a while. Pick the next best high stimulus to fatigue ratio alternative, keep it there, keep leg pressing or keep dumbbell pressing, and then maybe next mesocycle or a couple mesocycles later, you come back around through your rotation of other good exercises for that muscle group, and you're like, oh yeah, hack squats. It used to bother my knees, but that was like months ago. Let me try it. You try a little technique fix, and all of a sudden, everything's hunky-dory. And look, sometimes it doesn't even work like that. Sometimes for months and months, and maybe forever, very unlikely forever, you're going to have exercises that you just never do again because they just suck for your body. Maybe they always did. But this is a little formula. If you're experiencing problems with a given exercise, failure to recover to hit PRs, specifically oftentimes with joint and connective tissue pain involved, this is a great way to incrementally think about, okay, I'm just going to change a few things. And if that works, great. I'll be back in the mix super soon. If not, we can take that exercise out, because remember, in strength sport, powerlifting, weightlifting, there are exercises which you have to compete at. You can't just get rid of them. And if you do get rid of them, you got to weasel them back in somehow to peak or take time away from competition until you can do the competitive movements. If you can't do a clean and jerk, I mean, you're a real deep shit for weightlifting. Bodybuilding, hypertrophy training, which is what this lecture is about, there's no one critical exercise ever that you have to do, right? You don't look at someone's quads and you're like, for sure, hack squats. Well, maybe it's just leg presses. Maybe it's just squats. Maybe it's just a bunch of high rep lunges and leg extensions. You can get big quads doing all kinds of stuff. So don't get super religious about, okay, have to keep this exercise in. Be flexible. And if it's under recovering, specifically with joint connective tissue problems, this is a good way to go about it. Now, that's option 1. Next longer time scale, more serious problem is if a muscle group is under recovered, okay? How do you know that you're under recovered in a muscle group? Well, you're underperforming in a given muscle group, which means that pretty much every exercise you're failing to hit PRs. So if your chest, sticking with a simple example, is actually as a muscle under recovered, it's not like, oh, my benches went bad, but my incline went great. The actual pectoralis major is significantly under recovered, which is what this example is. That means your bench is going to suck, your dumbbell press sucks, you're weaker on the machine press, and dips feel like crap. Everything involving your chest is off, right? That's just the way it works. If that's the case, especially if it's in the context of a high degree of muscle soreness, like you got sore on Monday, now it's Thursday, you're still kind of sore, and your PRs are all way off, and it's for all the exercises, and specifically, if you are, a lot of times this will happen as you get closer to the end of a mesocycle or in the middle, but pretty high volumes are being done. You know, it's probably not a fluke. Like the muscle itself has been really, really degraded and is pretty significantly under recovered. Something should be done to remediate that. Something should be done to let that muscle heal. What's that something? Our best option is the following. The next session, you were supposed to, you finish that session hard, okay, as hard as you can, the current session with chest or whatever. Let's say it's Monday. Let's say you have chest again next Thursday. Your next session should be a very easy session, much more easy. Exact numbers are very difficult to find. It's very individually dependent, but I've got a really quick template for you. You drop the load down by either 0%, so you can stick to the same loads, same heavy weights as planned, or as a little as 50% of your plan. So you were going to bench 200, you can even go down to benching 100. That easy, because healing the muscle is fundamentally what we're trying to do here. And you take your sets, your total volume, and you reduce it by 50 to 75%. Yes, that means if you did 8 sets on Monday and you were supposed to do 8 sets on Thursday, you might do 2 sets of chest on Thursday, 75% reduction. That's a big deal. Why? Because it's easy to conserve muscle, but healing muscle requires backing off like crazy. Because remember what you're trying to do. You're trying to heal the chest in this example so much that next Monday and Thursday and Monday and Thursday, the chest is healed and good to go for weeks more of productive training. That means backing off real big. The last thing you want to do is back off just a tiny bit so that you get a worse workout, but you don't have any net healing because it's still so much damage. You don't catch up on healing. Okay. That's a bad deal because at the end of the day, you're just going to be back in the same crappy scenario you were next week. And you're not going to be growing because you're overly damaged. You're not going to be providing a ton of overload, so there's not going to be any delayed growth either. So what the hell do you have to do? You have to do something again, which you should have done the first time, to actually recover. And here's the real tricky part. Can you push these sessions close to failure if they're real volume? Yes. But ideally, for safety reasons and recovery reasons, you probably want to stay real far from fail. Okay, and it says here 5 RIR at least, nowhere close to fail. That means this is really a recovery session. Okay, anyone who doesn't know a whole lot about training should be watching you. If they're watching you that session, they'll be like, I feel like you're not working too hard. You're like, exactly. I'm doing a recovery session. If someone's watching you and they're like, man, killer session, and you're like, thank you. It's supposed to be a recovery session. They're like, well, what the hell are your real sessions like? You must just be like a nuclear bomb. And you're like, yeah, I guess I'm just an idiot because this really is a real session. It has to be much easier. Maybe lighter. Maybe you can still train heavy. A ton less volume, at least half the volume, or at most half. And then at least something like 5 RIR. For the love of God, 3 RIR, folks. Back away from failure because pushing to failure is really fatiguing and really damaging. You want to back off, not because you're a wuss, but because you want to back off enough to give yourself that recovery so that next Monday, whatever muscle it is, in this case, in this example, the chest, is super healed and ready to go. Because then you have all the free sort of runway in the world to have awesome back-to-back-to-back chest workouts, right? And then what do you do in the next session? Well, so Monday you had a crappy workout, under-recovered. Thursday, you take that recovery session as described. Next Monday, do you just go and do whatever you had planned? Not exactly. You use the same weight, same failure proximity, so it's very close, same plan. So like, let's say you did 100 pounds on the bench this Monday, recovery session Thursday. Next Monday, 105, right? And if you were going 2 from fail this Monday, like 1 from fail is the target next Monday. But however, you want to knock a few sets off the plan because when you did the super easy recovery session on Thursday, your volume sensitivity rose and your ability to resist damage from high volumes fell. That's a good thing because you're super recovered and sensitive to growth. That if you did, let's say, 6 sets of chest Monday and then 3 sets of chest or something Thursday to recover, next Monday, don't do 7 sets. Do like 4 or 5 sets. A little lower, still a great workout. And then Thursday you can do more. Then next Monday you can do more, so on and so forth. So because you took such an easy day Thursday to recover a little bit, ease back into the volume. You can still train just as heavy as planned, just as close to failure as planned, but just a little bit less volume. That way, I'll put it to you this way. If you don't do that, there's a chance that because you got so sensitized to volume on Thursday, you come back and do 7 sets of chest on Monday, you can nuke your chest, get super sore, and then next Thursday, you're again under-recovered and you're in the same crappy place you were. Once you experience an under-recovery episode, being more conservative is absolutely the best way to go, okay? It's like if you're leading a column of tanks or something, and you run them out into a field, and you take tons of fire, and you pull the tanks back behind the tree line, and the next time you cross over to that field, you're not going to be like, all right, well, same speed. You may be a little more cautious, because the bad stuff happened the last time you did that. Just the same way you smash your chest way too much, when you're coming back, ease in, ease in. The worst that can happen is you can have a great workout, heal from it extra quick, super much, like very on time. By next Wednesday, you're completely healed and you're like, all right, I have the green light to start stepping a little slower to more and more difficult, because that's the key. That's where all the growth comes from, is these small steps towards more difficult, not ramping like crazy, getting super sore and having to back off again. All right. What about a bad session? Okay. What do we say is a bad session? Well, you're underperforming, but it's not just per muscle group. It's not just your chest this time. Let's say the session is chest and back and biceps. Strange session, I know, but work with me here. Off the cuff example. You have to, in order to execute a full session protocol, everything in the session has to go poorly. And look, unfortunately, sometimes that does happen. Your chest training that day sucks. Your back training sucks. And your biceps training sucks, right? All or most of the exercises, usually all, fail to hit PRs in that session. And a lot of times this especially happens in a context of a high degree of muscle soreness or fatigue from the last session. A lot of times that last session, let's say Monday you're under recovered, means last Thursday that you did the same session, you crushed it. And then you just didn't heal over the weekend. You came in and you were still messed up and you underperformed. Sometimes you've healed fine, but you just have a random day or not so random day, maybe you stayed up all night or something, and you just feel like crap coming in, you just have a really bad session. What do? Well, if you catch the fatigue early and you're confident enough that you know fatigue when you see it, more advanced lifters are like this, you can actually just execute the per muscle group recovery protocol that we just talked about in the last slide for every single muscle group of that session right then and there. So for example, like in a lot of top power lifters and stuff, they know how this works. Bodybuilders too, they'll have bent rows and then they'll have pull downs, they'll have bench press, they'll have flies, and then they'll have dumbbell curls. They'll do their first warm up of bent rows and they'll be like, nope. Like I felt like crap all through the warm-ups. Everything feels tight. I feel super weak. My lats are still sore. My chest is still sore. Like it's just nah. Or one work set later, you eat shit. Your PR is nowhere near to be found. Everything feels like crap. You even cramp up on one of the sets. Like, dude, I know when to say when. It sounds like you're wussing out, but a lot of times it's just accumulated wisdom. And when you didn't used to listen to yourself 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and you were like, fuck that. Wartime, you would pull a pec or pull a tricep or something, and you're smarter than that now. So if you catch it early, just start the recovery protocol for each muscle group, just like we talked last time. Do it for all the muscle groups in the session. Really awesome thing about this is if you catch it early, let's say Thursday, amazing workout. Monday, you didn't heal yet. One working set into Monday, you cap it, and you're like, that's it. Recovery protocol needs to be executed now. The great thing is you don't have a crappy session. You have a great recovery session. And then by next Thursday or the coming Thursday, you're 100% healed and you're ready to ascend all the way back up. No problem. If you do choose to say, okay, I'm going to grind and see where it goes. Once you get past halfway through your session and you're like, all right, like clearly I am very beat up. This session sucks. It's too late to take a recovery session because you've already incurred so much damage. So you might as well finish that session strong and get a little functional overreaching effect. Then you'll have to do a recovery session on that Thursday. And then you have to take it at any one point. But look, you might as well take it earlier than later if you know it's coming, right? It's kind of like, you're on a road trip and there's this really awesome gas station and you're at a quarter tank. You're like, we might as well stop here and get ahead of the game a little bit versus being on like a 20th of a tank. And there's like a sign that's like, no gas stations for the next 50 miles. And you're like, oh my God, I should have taken that one a little early. When you have the ability to do a recovery session and you for sure know that you need one and you can take it early, taking it early is better because you can get right back into normal training. But sometimes you just don't know. And I'm with you guys on that. Like I've had tons of sessions myself where set number one, forget even the warm-ups. The warm-ups feel like shit. Even the first set doesn't go poorly. And then I'm like, you know what, man? Let's give it one more set. I do the next set, PR. Next set, PR. Crazy mind-muscle connection. Super awesome pump. The rest of the session's like a nuclear bomb. Amazing. I'm like, man, I sure am glad I didn't just shut it down. I could have taken a recovery session, but it would have been kind of wasted session because clearly I didn't need one. So I still hit PRs, still got great mind-muscle connection, and so on and so forth. So sometimes you don't know. If you know, take a recovery session right away. If you don't know, keep training. If once you get past the halfway point and you haven't done a recovery session yet, and then you're like, okay, clearly things aren't going well, just finish strong and then do the recovery session next time, right? Now, When you do execute the recovery protocol, make sure it's for all of the muscles trained in the current session, even if some of them are split up and trained differently in the next session. So for example, if you had chest and biceps in this session, the next session for chest is on Thursday, but the next session for biceps, because they're more high frequency, is a Wednesday. You don't wait till Thursday to recover the biceps. The very next time you train them, that would be Wednesday, you do recovery for biceps. So that when you do Thursday and you do the chest recovery, you can actually do an overloading bicep workout. So we're going to treat this as muscle group by muscle group, not necessarily session by session. All right. Half week. Here's the deal. What is a recovery half week and when do we take one? We take one, sort of not ironically, when we are failing to recover for half a week or about that length of time, sometimes a little longer. So basically, you are underperforming for a given muscle group or a session or a whole session just sucks, or just chest sucks for every exercise. So there's definitely a muscular problem, not just a weird technique thing or a joint thing. And this is confirmed at least 2 sessions in a row. Because sometimes you just get away with taking a recovery session and you're good to go if it's just one bad performance. Sometimes one bad performance, you're like, you know what? Like I had a fight with my girlfriend, but then now we're all good. Wednesday sucked. Friday, I think I'm just going to hit it hard. You hit it hard and you didn't even need a recovery session. Sometimes that's the case. But 2 poor performances in a row for the same muscle group, that's bad. That means, you have an inherent underlying high level of fatigue in that muscle. For example, let's say you train chest Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Monday, shitty chest workout, no PRs, everything sucked. Wednesday, shitty chest workout, no PRs, everything sucked. Man, just Friday, okay, taking just an easy recovery session Friday may not cut it. Because you're in deep and it's confirmed that you have really high fatigue because 2 sessions in a row, it sucked. This is especially true because here's the deal. If you are not currently training high volumes and the reps in reserve are pretty high, like you're not super close to failure, that could just be a fluke. And maybe you can just take Friday as a recovery session, come back next Monday and you're golden. Total possibility. But you need a recovery half week if you underperform 2 sessions in a row for the same muscle group. And it's in the context of like you're doing a ton of volume. So the impetus, the sort of drive for that kind of under recovery is there. Like it's obvious why you're not recovering because the volume's insane, and especially true if it's high volume and close to failure. Because it's not a mystery, right? Someone could ask you like, maybe you just underperformed because you were just psychologically off for 2 sessions. Like, yeah, I would normally agree with you, but 10 sets of quads in every session, 1 to fail, I'm feeling like the quads actually are under recovered. It's not psychological when there's a ton of stuff going on, right? So, and all this often happens when do you have high volumes paired with high relative efforts? It's at the middle of the mesocycle or later. So if it's like week 1 and you have 200 performances, yeah, maybe some weird stuff happened. Take 1 recovery session or just adjust your technique and you could be fine. But if it's like week 4 or week 3 and you underperform and it's high volumes, it's close to failure, you're going to need some meat and potatoes recovery strategy in order to bring down what is probably, we estimate, a pretty high level of fatigue. Now, it's not high enough to take a whole week of easy training. And the rest of your body's probably fine. It's just a couple muscle groups, maybe just 1. So we don't have to pull back on everything. It's not one of those. The recovery half week is a great tool when deloading, which is a full week of recovery sessions, is like overkill, okay? But it's enough to where 1 session isn't good enough. So how do you execute a recovery half week? Well, whatever your current week is on, try to finish it as strong as you can. Okay. Finish your current half week strong. So if it's like Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday that you're trained really hard, Monday starts to suck and kind of like last Friday sucked too. Finish Monday, finish Tuesday strong, as good as you can. And then the recovery half week begins for that next Thursday, Friday. What you do is it's really simple. You apply the recovery session protocol for the session, remember from last time, to every single session for half of a week. Yeah, that means if you train 6 times a week, that like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, half week, every single thing is lowered to recovery status, to recovery style session, which makes it super easy. But here's the deal. You could say, well, hold on, like not all of my muscles are messed up. Wouldn't it just be for the muscles? If we need a half week, that means fatigue is really high. There's a risk that systemic fatigue is getting up there and dropping everything down to basically half difficulty, or whatever the recovery session difficulty is, for a whole half a week. Not only does it locally address the muscle failure to recover, but it also brings whatever systemic fatigue is getting not quite to deload levels high, but fucking pretty high, it brings that down too. A recovery half week can really re-energize you for every other muscle group, including the ones that are really the reason you're taking it. And they can buy you weeks more of training, which is awesome because you don't have to deload for a whole week to buy yourself weeks of training. That's super great. When you come back after that half week, you want increased loads, same RIR targets as you need to, as you planned. So if this half of the week you did 2 reps in reserve, the second half of the week, you did 5 reps in reserve, super easy recovery. Next week, it's 1 rep in reserve and 5 more pounds on the bar. Totally. However, remember, from a recovery half week, just like even from one session, volume sensitivity is going to really rise, which means if you're doing sets of 4 at the beginning of the mesocycle, or say 4 sets of chest, for example, at the beginning of the mesocycle, and you got up to doing 8 sets of chest, and then the recovery problem started, you took a half week, our recommendation is to start somewhere at the midpoint between those two when you're done with the recovery half week. So you started at 4 in week 1, week 3 you got up to 8, and let's say week 3.5 to 4 is recovery half week because week 3 thrashed you. When you start at week 4, start at 6 sets. Okay. It's not so easy as to be 4, but it's not 8. And it's sure as shit not 9 or 10, because that would just blast you right back into the problems you're trying to solve. So it's essentially, we got Icarus a little bit. We started to burn and, close to the sun. We really reduced our shit. And then we don't just Icarus right back into the sun. We ease in and we ease in and we ease in, and boom, there you go. There's 2 more productive weeks of training, not right back into the fire and burnt right out and falling out the other way. Deloading. Deloading is a very colloquial term. It's one that's in common utilization. And it's sometimes a general term that's applied to just any sort of reduction of volume and or intensity or relative effort to recover. And that's not wrong, but colloquially, deload is usually used for a week-long stretch of recovery sessions, okay? When do you need to deload? And this is a very, very common question, and we're going to answer it right now for hypertrophy training. When you are underperforming in a given muscle group or session for every exercise, and it's the second or more time this past meso. So in week 3.5, your biceps had to have a recovery session. In week 5, your biceps had to have a recovery half week along with the rest of your body. It's now week 7 of your mesocycle and your biceps are again underperforming. Man, it's probably nothing a recovery half week is going to really, really solve. And a lot of the rest of your body, most of your muscles or all of your sessions start to tank as well, because now you have a different problem. It's not just that your biceps have sort of flared up and we can cool them back down. It's your triceps are doing it too. A lot of your muscles are on their second or third requirement for recovery, and that systemic fatigue that they all cause and spill over is now really, really high. And just a recovery half week even won't do it. If a recovery half week buys you another week of productive training, your accumulation to deload paradigm is 1 or 2 to 1. 2 to 1 sucks. That's like training for 8 months out of the year and taking 4 months off. This is not a very efficient way of doing things. It's time to really, really back up, really drop fatigue, take a whole week to do it so that systemic and local factors are essentially down to close to baseline, and we can line up another productive many, many weeks of training in the next mesocycle to actually get good results. How do you know if your systemic fatigue is up? One way, which is all the other muscles start underperforming, but you can tell from other more subjective measures. For example, you have starting to get poor appetite in a situation, maybe you're cutting, but you still have a poor appetite. You're like, oh, that's not good, right? Sleep trouble, lethargy, like you feel like kind of like crap all the time, and a lot of times you tend to have a psychological feeling. This is kind of a trip. It's a real thing. It's been scientifically studied. People who are overreached, have a lot of systemic fatigue, tend to feel more often than not psychologically overwhelmed. And it's not like a conscious decision. You're like, oh, this is just too much work. It's not you're thinking about it. You can feel overwhelmed about everything. Like you're doing really, really great at work, but you're overreaching in your hypertrophy training, and your boss calls you and he's like, hey, can you come in and just fill out some forms tonight? I know, but we've got to get this project out to the next people in line. Usually you'd be like, no problem. I'm just coming by the gym after. I'll be in at 8 o'clock. I'll sign all the forms. I'll take a look at them. I'll fax them to you or email them over. Great. But like, if you're super overreached, the way you might react is like, oh, fuck. I gotta go to work. Oh God, I hope I don't mess up the forms, and everything's just too much. Like work is crazy. All they do is they just require so much of me, and you just feel later when your fatigue is lower, you can be like, the hell was I doing? Why was I freaking out so much? You tend to freak out more, be anxious. When all of that or a lot of that is present, and you're super sore everywhere, and you've already tried some recovery sessions, and your muscles are still getting some trouble, you're probably in a high systemic fatigue state, and it's time to do something serious. That recovery sessions, per muscle group work, or even half weeks just don't have the power to solve. And that's when deloading comes in handy. And of course, especially if this is in the context of very high volumes, very high relative efforts, low reps in reserve, often at the end of your usual meso-length. So for example, if your usual mesocycle is 5 accumulation weeks and then 1 deload week, and you're in week 5.5 because you auto-regulate and you're burning alive and you feel overwhelmed, you have trouble sleeping, your PRs are all in the drain, you don't have to really like flex your Einstein part of your brain to realize you're systemically fatigued. Because like, why the fuck wouldn't you be? You have already exceeded your normal duration of accumulation by half a week. Like, yeah, it fucking makes sense that you're burned out. You don't be like, man, like, what am I doing wrong? Nothing. You're training hard and it's just time to quit. Like, it's like if you were at work, usually you leave work at 6 p.m. It's if you're at work, like working on a crazy project and it's 11 p.m. and you're almost done with it and you're checking your work. You're like, man, my brain's just not working right. It's not fucking supposed to work right at 11 p.m. You're like 5 hours over your normal work schedule. It's totally fine. Now, if you feel like you need a deload in week 1 of training, okay, you got to put some Einstein stuff into that and figure out what the hell is going on. But at the end of a high volume accumulation phase, going real close to failure, it's not rocket science. It's time to back off big. So how do you do it? First, finish your current week strong, usually good. Now, if it's like Monday or Tuesday, just start deloading right away. Don't finish the whole week if you're like burning alive. But if it's Thursday or Friday, if it's Wednesday, dealer's choice. Thursday or Friday, finish the week strong, as good as you can, maybe modify some stuff, some more burnout stuff, keeping it safe, high volumes, close to failure. Then next week, start a formal deload week. There's tons of ways to do this, including the very simple, just every session is a convention, just recovery session. Just like we talked about earlier, for muscle group, you could just do every session like that on a deload. But there's a slightly more complex way that actually saves you time. The first half of a deload week, you cut your sets by 50%. So if you're doing 8 sets of chest, it's now 4 sets of chest, okay, per session. You take your load and you keep it between 75 and 100% of your normal load. So if you're normally lifting like 400 pounds, it's somewhere between 300 and 400 pounds, right? So it's still pretty heavy. And the RIR is pretty high, 0 to 3 reps in reserve. So like you're still grinding it, it's just way, way lower volume, maybe slightly lower weight. That's just the first half of the week. The second half of the deload week, if you do it this way, 50% of sets again. So if you're normally doing 8, it's 4. It's not another 50% cut. It's just 50 of the whatever you were doing last week. 50% load reduction. So if you're normally squatting 400, you squat 200 now, which is a joke. And the RIR is 10 plus. Okay. In many cases, at least 5 plus. So like if you're squatting pretty strong, if you're squatting 400 for sets of 15, now you squat 200 for sets of 5. I mean, it's a joke. That is a super, super recovery workout. It's just a warm up, right? And that second half of the week heals not only your psychological state and the musculature, it heals the joints and connective tissues a ton as well because it's so light, so low volume, so easy. Now, if that second half of the week feels like anything more than an easy warm up, you're doing too much. And the risk of doing too much is much greater than the risk of not doing enough. Like if you just don't even show up the rest of that week, I assure you as a PhD in sports science, you are missing out on a fraction of 0.1% of total lifetime gains. But if you come in and you go too hard, you're missing out on 1% or something of lifetime gains because the chances of getting injured go up much more. Chances of not dropping fatigue and having a shitty next whole meso go up a lot. Like when you put on the brakes, put them on hard. Okay. And over braking is better. As a matter of fact, That second half of the week, if you normally come in 3 times, like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, what you can do is take your Thursday and Friday, because it's so easy now, you can condense them, your Thursday and Saturday, put them both into Friday. So instead of coming in 3 times a week to the gym, you come in, instead of coming 6 times, on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, all the way through Saturday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you do each as their own workout, although it's much easier. Thursday, you don't come into the gym. Friday, you come in and do Thursday, Friday, and Saturday's work, which is going to take a sum total of like 40 minutes because it's ridiculously easy. And then here's the cool part. Friday and Saturday and Sunday. Sorry, I misspoke. Saturday and Sunday. Because normally Saturday you come to the gym. Saturday and Sunday, you're completely off. So instead of that second half of the week, usually for you is Thursday you train, Friday you train, Saturday you train, Sunday is off. During a deload with a condensed version, you don't train Thursday, you don't train Saturday, you don't train Sunday, you just train Friday, and that training is super easy. That half of a week with just 1 easy session versus the normal 3 hard sessions, the amount of fatigue reduction potential is enormous, and you will feel 50 trillion times better after that. So much better, in fact, that when you go on to the next mesocycle, you have a whole accumulation phase of super low fatigue and tons of milking out to do, and you can have another whole productive mesocycle of training. That usually works. It works, probably 4 out of 5 times that you try it. 4 out of 5 mesocycles. But in roughly 4 out of 5 mesos, you're going to reach a situation, especially if you're an intermediate or advanced lifter. Beginners can just kind of keep cranking with deloads, no problem. You're going to reach a situation where a deload is not enough. Okay? How do you know if that's the case? How do you know that this next form of reduction of training volume, this next form of recovery, is something you require? And that next one is called active rest. How do you know it's required? Well, you're experiencing psychological burnout, okay, that even deloads don't fix. You're at the end of a deload and someone's like, look, I'm ready to do this shit next week. And you're like, no, I hate the gym. I don't want to be in here anymore. I hate the weights. Hilariously enough, I'm in my last hard training week right now before I'm scheduled to take active rest as I record this. And I can kind of that's how I feel right now. I'm not super excited to train, which is crazy because training's my life. But if you push it hard enough for long enough, you get to that point. Joint and connective tissue issues that are not solved by a deload. Like your shoulder was really starting to bother you in the last 2 mesocycles, and this last one, it really bothered you. It's at the end of the deload week, and you're like, nope, still hurts. What are you going to do? Have another accumulation phase of it bothering you even more and you can retire afterwards? No, you may need something longer, a little bit more of a huge reduction in volume so that you can really, really heal stuff in a huge way, right? Almost always, this doesn't happen after 1 mesocycle. It happens after multiple mesocycles of really highly productive, high-volume training. And at the end of maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 of these mesos, then a deload just isn't enough. It's kind of like you may have a very well-balanced life, and weekends are enough to really get you psyched for another week of the job you love. After 5 or 6 months, you may be in a position where weekend's not enough. I need a fucking vacation. I need to go to Tulum or some shit like that, not see another human being for a week, not see my phone, just take my phone and throw it away. Don't contact me by email. Work, as far as I can tell you, I'm dead. You need that kind of a big break. It's the same kind of idea that sometimes just weekends or sometimes just deload weeks are not enough to reduce the fatigue. And hopefully you can sort of plan these active rests around life events like vacations. You kind of know when it's coming after a while if you're intermediate or advanced. If you're beginner or intermediate, though, the way you learn when you need an active rest is when a deload just isn't enough. And sometimes you don't know. That's how active rest is sort of organically born. If you don't know what active rests are, and if you just never been on YouTube and watched this video, if none of that concerns you, you will eventually discover active rest yourself when you do your normal deload. Let's say you do know what deloads were. And at the end of the deload or the beginning of the next accumulation phase, halfway through week 1, you're like, my elbow still hurt and I don't want to be here. It's probably not that you just got over lifting altogether and you hate it. It's very rare. It's probably that you just need a more extreme form of recovery modality, which is what you're going to get. The good news is you can start to know when you almost feel like that, so you can plan an active rest and not psych yourself out by starting an accumulation meso and then having to fall off the wagon. Now, what are the options here? Best way to do this is to start with a deload, which is good news because it's really simple. Deload first. There's another way we're going to talk about you can do this, but that's optional. Deload first, and then the next week, you take 1 more week, but you straight up don't go to the gym. You don't even go to the gym because a part of the psychological stress of training is just being in the gym. And you want to just take yourself away completely from that altogether. Okay. You don't restrict your eating because that's another source of psychological stress and physical stress, by the way. You just eat plenty of protein, plenty of tasty things, sort of whatever you want. You sleep a ton and live life like a normal person. And I don't know how a normal person lives because I'm a machine designed by the government to train hard. Just kidding. It's a corporation, not a government. It's the Soviet Union. Haha, Russia joke. So I'm inclined to believe that the way normal people live life is what I see on commercials. So you guys know like car commercials or deodorant commercials where all the young, hip, beautiful people are on the beach and they're having a barbecue and they're throwing a Frisbee and everyone's like ridiculously attractive. There's a golden retriever there. Who knows whose dog it is? He's nabbing the Frisbee and you're eating chicken wings over the fire. And how do you even most beaches you're not allowed to do a barbecue on. It's a public space. In any case, just live like that, goddammit. Just your favorite car or beer or deodorant commercial. Do that for a week. And live like a normal person. Because look, real talk, a lot of us get caught up, because we love it, because it's a great thing in this like bodybuilding lifestyle or this fitness lifestyle where we're just grinding. And someone's like, what are you doing at 2 p.m. today? You're like, what the fuck you think I'm doing? I'm going to the gym. It's legs. Every Wednesday's legs at 2 p.m. How dare you even ask me that, right? It's like when my dad sees protesters on like Fox News or something or CNN, he's like, why aren't they at their day job? I'm like, that's a pretty good point. So a lot of times, just like with work, we say normal people go to work. A lot of times we have this idea that I just train. That's what I do. And it's really difficult to psychologically take yourself away from that and go, this whole week, I'm not going to train. It does two things. One, it relieves pretty much any and all psychological distress you're having from training. Like if you're really overtraining, you sure as hell won't be over it when you start missing the shit out of it. And two, right into that point, you start missing it so much, it fills your heart up with this crazy desire to just train your ass off. And at the end of that week, when you're ready to start training again, begin a whole macro cycle of training, multiple mesos strung together, multiple blocks strung together, you are just psychotic and you're like, I'm going to take over the fucking world. And that desire of yours to train really hard can fuel 6 months, 8 months, 12 months of awesome training. And that's exactly the point. At the end of one of these active rest phases, you should be fueled up psychologically, physically, joint-wise, muscle-wise, everything for months and months and months of hardcore training, right? When you come back, make sure to ease it in. The biggest temptation in the world is after active rest. If you ask someone, the average trainee, like that Monday when they finished active rest, how much volume do you feel like doing? They're going to be like, all of it. Get on the hack squat, do 8 sets, piss blood the next day because your quads just melted into your bloodstream. Bad news, right? That's how you get hurt. That's how you get rhabdo, all this other crazy shit. Don't do anything like that. Remember, your volume sensitivity is going to be through the roof. Your growth sensitivity is going to be through the roof. Start with easy shit. Very far from fail, 3 or 4 reps in reserve, several sets per muscle group, sometimes lower frequency. Ease in because guess what you have to make things harder? An entire macro cycle of a little harder, a little harder, a little harder, harder than last time. That's another Greg Doucette impression for you guys, right? Got a good point. Got to go harder, harder, harder. But if you start at super fucking insanity hard, where the fuck are you going to go other than to injury? Nowhere. So after active rest, you're a mature person. You're a fucking adult. You're a planner. That's why the fuck you're watching videos by Renaissance Periodization. You want to periodize. Resist the temptation, which is a psychological feeling, which children organize their lives around, and do the right thing as an adult. Start off slow. Start off easy. It's not a wuss move because you're preparing yourself to go sky high eventually. And on the way there is where you make all of your gains. No one session makes or breaks your gains. And when you are really sensitive to volume and growth, but at a high risk of injury because you're desensitized to all that work capacity, start out just a little bit. And then look, if it's too easy, next week you can up the volume a little bit. Awesome. Now, just a cool strategy for you guys to try. If you're at the end of sort of block or macro cycle of training and you're like in pieces to the point where you can't even deload, because sometimes your joints are so fucked up, your desire to train is so messed up that your deloading is the furthest thing from your mind. And sometimes it's not even a good idea. Here's what you can do. You take your recovery week, your active rest week, your non-training completely week first. Okay. So accumulation, week 5, hell, crazy psychoticness. Right after, off week, that active rest true week. Don't go to the gym. Get into that BMW commercial with your friends. Incredibly good looking. I have no idea where those people come from. My friends are all better looking than me. I guess I'm the ugly friend. After your easy, super easy week of doing basically nothing. Then you do the easy part of your deload week. The easiest part, you do it in reverse. And then you do the harder, heavier part of the deload week, and it kind of is a slow on-ramp. And then you do week 1, low volume, pretty close to failure now, real training, but ease in. So basically, as soon as you're Icarusing yourself and flying into the sun, drop all the way back down to earth, no training for a week, and then slowly come back up. I can't say as a sports scientist that there's one excellent way of doing this. Give both a shot, see how you feel. All right. Last up. Low volume resensitization phase. This you execute for a slightly different set of constraints and purposes. Why would you do such a thing? Well, you may be in the following situation. You're no longer getting good pumps or pumps at all, or getting sore from lower volumes. As a matter of fact, maybe not even higher ones. You legitimately feel like you're spinning your wheels. You feel like an endurance athlete. You do 10 sets of squats and someone's like, dude, your quad's blown up. You're like, no, I'm just tired. All right. That's not good. That means your volume sensitivity is super low. That means you're stimulating at least as much catabolic process as you are anabolic process. It's probably good to back away from high volume training and really lower how much volume you're doing to let your body resensitize to volume and have it be productive again. Now, if you're doing technical calculations and you've got, roughly your maximum recovery volumes and your minimum effective volumes, this is technically when your minimum effective volume starts to rise up real close to your MRV. That window of training you have left is real small, and that's not a good thing. So you're in the situation where you're still pumped to train psychologically. You don't need an active rest phase. Your joints are okay, so you don't need an active rest phase, but your training is just super stale. You're not getting pumps. You're not getting soreness from even pretty high volumes. What the fuck isn't this working? That means you're probably sort of desensitized to volume, and you need a low volume resensitization phase to resensitize to volume again and have it be super effective. So what you do first is for sure take a deload. Then, in the whole mesocycle after, you drop your training to maintenance volume, which is roughly, conservatively, a third of your typical volume. That means if you do sort of like 9 sets of back 3 times a week, 9 sets per session, 27 sets total, you would literally do 3 sets of back 3 times a week. That's 9 total sets per week. Way less than normal. Because remember, you're not going to lose any muscle, like that's confirmed by multiple studies. You're going to lose no muscle. But it's so little volume that your body starts to resensitize to volume again. And when you feed it later, 4 and 5 and 6 and 7, 8, 9 sets per session, it's like, holy shit, and it starts to grow again. Okay? And during this whole mesocycle, you progress in RIR like normal. So you start at like 3 RIR, end at 0, but you don't progress in sets at all. You start at 3 sets per session or roughly something like that, whatever maintenance volume is for you. And then the week 1 and then week 3 or 4, whenever you end at 3 sets per session. That's it. It wouldn't be resensitizing to volume if we progressed in volume. You don't change your volume at all. You keep it the same, super, super low. Now, here's the kind of messed up thing. Just be ready for this. During a resensitization phase, you are not going to be getting basically any pumps. You're not going to be getting any soreness. That's not the point. The point is to stay so far away from those things that when you reintroduce volume, they start happening again because they're good things. We want them, but it's going to be super, super easy training. And sometimes it's pretty heavy training. A lot of times sets of 5 to 10 reps is kind of ideal for that situation. It doesn't have to be sets of 5 to 10, but that's a pretty good start. You kind of feel like you're strength training, but you don't feel like you're really stimulating hypertrophy. Good news, you're not. You're preparing to stimulate hypertrophy, but really backing off on the volume, which is the big thing that causes hypertrophy. And for basically a whole mesocycle, you're not causing any growth at all, but you're not losing muscle. And what does that do is it sets you up for another many, many mesos, a whole block of awesome high volume hypertrophy training or progressive volume hypertrophy training. So yeah, you don't grow for a meso, but then you grow for 3 after. The alternative is if you're already really, really desensitized to volume, is not only do you not grow this meso, but you don't grow for any meso until this happens. So you could be 4 or 5 mesos in, but I haven't grown any muscle. And someone's like, what? It's messed up. Your diet good? You're like, yeah. Are you getting good pumps in the gym? You're like, no. Like, okay. You getting sore? Like, nope, can't feel a thing. Like, huh. Maybe your body's just gotten stale the whole volume and training process and you need to back off. Well, that is the correct answer. Sometimes active rest does that, and it does it almost every time, but sometimes you don't need active rest, and you can use this time to gauge your maintenance volume. You can use it to get a little stronger. You don't have to back off, because especially psychologically, when you're still pumped to train, you don't want to have to be like, take an active rest, and you're in that BMW commercial with your friends again, and you realize you're not your friends. You don't have a BMW. You don't want to be in this cabin in the woods situation. You want to fucking be lifting and breaking shit, and you should be at a gym because it's psychologically safe for the rest of society for you to be sequestered in a gym. That's when a resensitization phase is better, when you don't need an active rest, especially because you're ready to train super hard. Now, after one meso of this, you absolutely can resume normal training, again, at lower volumes. Okay, so if you did 3 sets per session at the maintenance volume during this phase, start with 4, and then go to 5 and then 6, as autoregulation would say, right? Or if, let's say, you're on a diet break, like you just did a big fat loss diet, you can take a maintenance phase, and then you can take another one because maybe you need more of a diet break, and it's sort of pointless if you're not hypercaloric or hypocaloric if you're not losing or gaining weight. It's a little bit pointless for advanced people to like try to recomp. So maybe you just stay at maintenance volume for longer. You can do another meso if you'd like. But if you're ready to go, either increase your calories a little bit or decrease by a little bit, you can absolutely go and hit up another progressive high volume phase. If you'd like, and if your joints are kind of beat up after resensitization, you can do an active rest phase, like you take a deload after this one and then take an active rest, and that'll launch probably a year of awesome growth. Sometimes people do that, where after like a year or 2 of insanely hard training, they basically have every problem in the book. They'll take a low volume phase, just like this one, and then an active rest phase. And I mean, that's just like the reset of a lifetime. How many of these do you have to do in your entire training career? The full reset? I don't know, maybe 3 or 4, but every now and again, they're really, really handy. Folks, what is the TLDR of this entire gigantic talk? You now, if you go back and scroll through this video, you have a toolkit to address recovery problems at every stage of the process, right? You know how easy you need to take it depending on how easy you need to take it. Because we don't want a situation where we are really messed up and we only take a recovery session and we're just back to dog shit right after. We're never left. We also don't want a situation in which we are, fundamentally pretty good to go. We just need like one easy session. And we take an active rest phase or a low volume resensitization phase. For every magnitude of recovery problem, there is a timescale solution. And all you have to do is match one to the other. And then you are intelligently using sports science to get the kind of recovery you need, when you need it, in the amount you need it, for the optimal training to continue to progress and evolve, for you to get as jacked as humanly possible, eventually so jacked that you challenge the military, win, and we all call you fearless leader. Until then, I bid you adieu.